If you're the parent of a primary age child and you're desperately trying to follow the advice of your child's school of reading 5 times a week, but you are having battle after battle after battle every single night, then this is going to be the video for you. In this video, I'm going to talk through some strategies to try and get rid of that battle so that both you and your child can actually enjoy the reading session and you can start seeing your child make progress. Quite often, if you speak to the school and your child is slightly behind in reading, they're going to say to you, oh, don't worry, keep practicing the reading at home, it'll click eventually. And absolutely, yes, this can be true, but sometimes children need something a little bit extra to just address that gap that they've got. And quite often it's the gap between getting from decoding each word to reading fluency. There's quite a big jump there. In schools at the moment, there is just this jam-packed curriculum. The teachers are just trying to get through as much content as possible because they have to. They're usually in the classroom alone with 30 children, or maybe they're lucky enough to have an extra adult. But it's really tough for them. It means that some children are not quite getting what they need, and it's not the teacher's fault, it's just the current system. And actually, that's the reason that I quit my job. I was actually a teacher and a head teacher with 15 years experience, and I left my role at the end of August. The reason for that is because I decided to launch my own tutoring company, Colleen's Classroom, where I teach children online in small groups how to read, and I can address their individual gaps and move at the speed they need to and really just focus on their individual barriers. And already it's really working. I teach one boy, and when he came to me, he was below where he needed to be, and that's what most children are when they come to me. He was reading at the age of a 7-year-old, and now, just 6 weeks later, we are already reading books aimed at 9 to 12-year-olds. So actually that book behind me just there, My Friend the Enemy, it's a brilliant book. That's the book we're reading now, and he's got confidence and he's enjoying himself. So my strategies really do work. I have taught a child who was really nervous about her phonic sounds and didn't know them all. She's now mastered all of her age-related phonic sounds. And there's one girl who just hated reading, really didn't enjoy it because she was doing what I just spoke about. She was having to decode every single sound. But now she's reading more fluently. And in fact, she was off school with tonsillitis the other day, and she still came to my session because she enjoys them so much. So these strategies really do work. The reason supporting your child's reading is so important is because there's a lot of research around how reading gives access to other subjects. So if your child can read, they can access all the subjects. If your child actually enjoys reading, they are 6 times more likely to be above age related for their age. But also children who leave primary school as confident readers often earn more money than children who leave school not feeling very confident. So it really is important. So let's get going with the strategies and the things you can actually do at home to help your child. So like I said, we're going to focus on getting your child from that stage where they are just decoding every single sound to actually reading fluently. I'm going to talk about a very specific strategy today. There are other strategies, for example, making sure you practice all the phonics sounds that will turn up in that book before your child reads, or practicing the tricky words before your child reads the book. For example, if they come across the word said and you haven't practiced it in advance, they're going to read it phonetically, s-a-d, said. So lots of words in the English language just aren't phonetically decodable. So you're definitely going to want to practice those in advance. If you want some top tips on that, and also a top tip on how to lower the stakes at the beginning of the session, just to make it a bit more enjoyable, I do have a reading highlight on my Instagram that might help you. But I also do have a resource that you could potentially purchase with some ideas. If you are interested, just DM me. But the strategy I'm going to talk about today is actually how to do repetitive reading. Now, your school's probably mentioned this to you. They're sending that one book home and they leave it with you for a full week. And lots of parents often say to me that this really frustrates them because it's really boring for their child to read that same book over and over again. But there is a logic to that. The first time your child reads that book, they're probably going to sound out a lot of the words. So for example, if the sentence, let's just make it really basic, the dog barked, they're probably going to read it as the dog, bark, barked, barked. And they're not really going to understand what they've read. They need to be able to read it as the dog barked. And so the first time you read that book, they're going to read it by decoding everything, and it's not really going to make sense. So reading it again and again and again until they can read it fluently is really important. The problem with that is children can lose engagement. Now, sometimes it motivates them because they see themselves getting better and they like that. But if your child is saying, this is boring, we've read this book already, I don't want to read again, then instead you don't need to read the whole book, or if it's a longer like chapter book like the ones behind me, you don't have to read the whole chapter again every single night. What you can do is just select a page or even just select a paragraph or a sentence and practice that one. There are a couple of ways you can do this. Number one is you can model reading. So you can read that paragraph, you can read that sentence, you can read that page, whichever you're focusing on, but make sure you don't just read it beautifully, because your child is going to think, I can't do that. That might lower their confidence. Instead, you're going to want to model making mistakes, model decoding, and then rereading the sentence again, and model talking out loud. Example, you might say, oh, there's brackets there, I'm going to read that in a slightly different tone, and then you have a go at reading. So if I were, I'll just choose a book here. If I was going to be reading this book with my child and modelling it, I might read it as the cat, I'm stuck. 1 second, I'm just going to decode. Mouse. I'm just going to reread it now so it makes sense. The cat, the mouse, and the runaway train. And then they've heard you make a mistake, they've heard you decode it, and then they've heard you go back to the beginning and reread it so you're reading it fluently. That's one strategy that might help your child. Another thing you can do, and this is what I do a lot in my sessions, is I choose a sentence and I write that sentence on individual post-it notes. So for example, if I've chosen my sentence, let me actually just use one from the book because it'll be easier. So this sentence here, it says, this is the mouse with the cat on her tail. What I'm going to do is on post-it notes, I'm going to write each individual word on a separate post-it note. And then we're just going to practice reading those words and reading them fluently. So this is where I'm going to play games like splat the word mouse, and they have to splat the word that says mouse. Or maybe I'm going to hide all of the post-it notes around my living room, and they've got to walk around and they've got to find the specific one I've said. Or if they find one, they've got to read it and tell me what it says. Or I'm going to flashcard it. Whatever game you can think of, you can play snap with the words. Anything you can think of, use that so that your child can read each of those words by sight. Their challenge is to then see if they can put the sentence back in order again, and then you practice reading the sentence, and now they can read every individual word by sight. They should be better. And if you want to make it a bit more fun, you can then let your child choose a sentence and test you, and you then have to play the game, because children love being the teacher. So that's another strategy that works really well, is actually just unpick some individual sentences or some individual paragraphs, and that can be your activity for the evening. Reading every night with your child doesn't mean reading a whole book or a whole chapter. It means practicing their reading. And so I've got so many top tips, ideas and games that you can play at home with your child. So if you are interested, subscribe to this page, but also follow my Instagram, because it's where I have more top tips. So it's at Colleen's Classroom Tuition. Like I said, it's linked at the top of my page. Just give me a follow and have a little look through my content, and hopefully you'll get some more ideas.